Did you know that Dandy World isn't how it was originally planned? Behind the game, there are different concepts, designs, maps, and more things that ended up being scrapped. But fortunately, I've gathered everything I've found related to this. And through this elevator, we'll go floor by floor, visiting different types of discarded content. That way, I can highlight just 5 of them that I wish had made it into Dandy World. So, let's get started. Original characters from Quelver. Before DANDYS World was even an idea in Quelver's mind, they already had their own lineup of original characters, 4 of them, in fact, who would eventually become toons in this game. Glisten, at one point, was an original character created by Quelver, which was based on the series Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. So, if an Ed existed in the show, we would have seen a puppet version of Glisten taking part in the unsettling episodes of that series. The differences from the current design aren't many. We can see that in this version, their limbs are black. Her leg warmers had a pink gradient. Her bow has a couple of ribbons. She doesn't have pink cheeks. The style of her face is very different, and also, her body looks more like the handle of an old-fashioned mirror. Connie was an original character from the Epic Mickey universe. Her full name is Connie Belinsky. And in this design, we can see that her blouse had stripes. She had gloves like the ones Mickey Mouse wears, and her eyes were more open. Goop isn't based on an existing universe like Glisten and Connie. In Goop's design, we can see what looks like a tube full of ink on his back. 2 weapons on his arms. One blue and the other red. Some skates with the same color pattern in red and blue stripes on his torso. Additionally, there's also a human version of him, which keeps the same colors. But this one wears white overalls with a brown t-shirt, a pair of blue and red hairpins, and a backpack with a hazard symbol on the ground. Dandy, this time, before becoming the main character of his own world, the design is very similar to the current one. However, he has colorful socks. These share colors with the petals that Dandy has. His cheeks, instead of being green, were more of a yellowish tone. And his hands have these lines, making them look like little cat claws. Apparently, this design was going to be used in a game called Simply Dandy in 2022, which ended up being scrapped in the end. However, in the first game published by the designers of Dandy World, Floater Frenzy, we can find an Easter egg with Dandy showing these little claws on his hands. Within this concept art sheet of Dandy with socks, we can find this terrifying design, which appears to be Twisted Dandy. Featuring a remarkably thin, elongated body for distinct arms, an even bigger, more unsettling smile, and eyes that truly seem to ooze a viscous ichor. It's rumored that this design may have been reused for the creation of Twisted Astro, and that's where the idea of Astro having 4 arms comes from. For me, the design of this Twisted Dandy is incredible, and it becomes the first thing I'd love to see in Dandy World, since I think it's way more terrifying. And even though it might seem hard to implement, if there were a way to add jump scares, don't tell me you wouldn't be surprised by a scare from this Twisted Dandy. Designs before the release. Interestingly, the previous one isn't the only Twisted Dandy design that was scrapped. There's also this other one, which is much simpler. It seems like the ichor bursts out of his body and completely takes over his torso, about to cover his head and hands. His face shows a much more sinister expression, with a disturbing smile revealing large fangs. In this version, we can also see the deformation of the petals, which, along with his face, remain quite similar in the final design. A concept art of Dandy before the release of Dandy World has also been found. This is the design we all know, however, in one of his poses, we can see Dandy with his mouth open, showing some fangs and revealing his green tongue, which have not been shown in the game so far. Dandy World began its captivating story by showing the entire world this exciting teaser, in which we can clearly see Dandy, but looking a little different. His eyes are set in slits on his face, unlike the character's current design. Also, apparently, he would show a light through them, similar to how the animatronics in FNAF did in their game. I'm not really convinced by this look, since we'd probably see it with all the other toons too, and I think they'd end up looking weird. The scrap floater design features some variations in her clothing. her antennae have a different look. Her wings have a flower design instead of hearts. And also, in this version, we can see she has a proboscis, just like butterflies do. Twisted Floater has broken wings, antennae, and one of her eyelashes. The flowers on her wings disappear, and it's quite likely that her main mechanic was to catch tunes with her long tongue, using a cleverly placed trap on the floor. I truly think the scrap design for Twisted Floater is absolutely awesome, making it the second design I would genuinely save to see in the game, since the trap mechanic on the map using her powerful tongue is really quite cool and could be used in so many different ways. Can you imagine walking along and suddenly running into Twisted Floater's tongue, leaving you completely immobilized until another tune can free you? And LT, break time equals 0.5s/NGT. For me, that would add a lot to the gameplay. Overall, Twisted Gigi's design stayed the same, except for one thing. Originally, she was supposed to have 2 Icer arms coming out of her head instead of just 1. The old design of Twisted Glisten has a completely different expression compared to the current one. Instead of looking scared and worried, the scrap design shows a smiling, malevolent expression. Also, in this design, you can see that it doesn't have the bows on its arms, and the cracks on its face are bigger and very different. Originally, Pebble had a rounder, softer design, and its eyes were positioned differently. The scrap design of Twisted Pebble also has small differences compared to the current one. Its head seems bigger and sharper, it has fewer teeth, and its legs don't have claws. The old design of Poppy, although very similar, has significant differences. First of all, the original color of her clothes was going to be blue. Her bow and dress had some lighter colored spots. The sleeves on her dress were the same color, and her socks didn't have the stripes we see in her current design. Her second design has colors more similar to her current look. The spots and sleeves are yellow, while the dress, bow, and socks have the color we know today, although the stripes on the socks are still missing. Once Dandy World was released, the first scrap design was added as a Poppy skin, keeping the spots and sleeves but adding the characteristic stripes to her socks. Initially, it seems that Scrap was going to be a male tune, since it doesn't have the characteristic eyelashes of all the female tunes. This can be clearly seen in the old Astro posters and Stage Fright and Welcome to Garden View. And LT, break time equals 0.5s/NGT. Also, on her official information card, we can observe that the letter S and she seems to have been added later, since the available space after the exclamation mark is very small. So, it's quite possible that it originally said he instead. Originally, Twisted Shelly's design was very different from what we have now in Dandy's world. In that version, we see Shelly split into 3, her head, torso, and legs are completely separated, connected only by ichor. Because of this, she was even taller. Her mouth is completely covered by ichor, and her eyes are different. One has an elongated pupil, and the other is a bit more similar to the current design of Twisted Shelly. It's likely that this design was scrapped because they wanted it to look like or have some elements of dinosaurs due to Shelly's fascination with them. After this scrap design, we have this other one, which is even more different from the current version. It's much smaller, has sharp claws on its hands, its legs are completely covered in ichor, and there are sharp branches coming out of its back and heels. Additionally, there's a variation, where these branches could even come out of its eyes. Its face is broken around one of its eyes, and its mouth has a sad expression, showing its fangs. The first design of Sprout is smaller than the current one, although the ichor still covers half of Sprout. It leaves the mouth and one of the legs uncovered. Its hair is different. Its left arm shows some green claws, and finally, the biggest difference we can see is its scarf. Because it's shown as a claw made of ichor, instead of the sharp tip we have in the current design. In the old design of Twisted Bee, we can see its face, with an evil grin and sharp robotic claws. Also, it doesn't have legs, its torso has exposed wires, and it's possible that the initial idea was for it to appear out of nowhere through ventilation ducts. And just like with designs we've seen before, it's possible they weren't able to implement it correctly in the game. A second design, more similar to the one in the game, shows Twisted Bee with legs completely covered in ichor, as well as half of its left arm stained, and ichor dripping down its face. We can also see that it doesn't have a long neck, like in the current design. During a Quell stream in October 2024, he drew a concept art of Twisted Connie in which we can see that she would have longer arms, 4 claws on each hand, and only one eye was drawn, with a red X in the center. Apparently, he didn't finish it, but it's possible that her hair would have ended up covering the other eye. In the end, she ended up with a completely different design, and used textures, colors, and skins. Within Dandy World, there are small changes made to the textures, images, and colors in the character designs. These can be simple changes, so we won't go too deep into them, and I'll only talk about the ones I found most interesting. Dandy's damaged face. Dandy has an unused texture for roleplay, where she appears with a slight smile, an angry look, and red pupils. In the end, it was replaced by the one from her third phase, when you don't buy from her shop, V's damaged face. At one point, we could see V's uncomfortable face when taking damage. It was later replaced by a blue screen with the rebooting message and also by other messages unique to each skin. Star Knight Astro. Initially, this Astro skin faced to the left side, but it was changed to avoid strange animations. At some point, Box 10 would have a skin with glasses. However, the design was not continued, and only the glasses were drawn. Scraps was going to have a green dragon skin with horns, and there was another red version, both made for Halloween, but in the end it was scrapped because the model wasn't optimized. The Shelly Dinosaur skin had 3 variants. In the end, the color we all know won. The Pebble Startime skin initially had a green checkered blanket at its side, with tassels on rods instead of a pillow. The Shelly Startime skin would have worn a shirt and accessories of a different color and design compared to the final version. The old Pebble model included an unused tongue, which was removed in version 0.7.1. The tongues on their skins had their respective colors, and believe it or not, I think that adding this kind of extra element to the model could have made Pebble more expressive. Maybe later they would have added more elements like this to other tunes, which is why it becomes the third thing I would say to see in Dundee's world: floors, maps, and rooms. Not only were there changes made to the tunes during the development of Dandy World, but also to the maps. A fundamental part of the game also needs to work and look right, so a lot of things have been changed up to now. There was an interesting Easter egg of the character Kinito from his very own game Kinito Pet, discovered inside a map in Dandy World, which was subsequently removed because it had been added by the developer who was unfortunately fired. And while I do agree that Quell and his team want to completely disconnect from what that developer did, but the idea of having Easter eggs in the game seems like a great idea to me, and it's the 4th element I would save. I'd love to see these kinds of nods while I'm playing. Maybe an Easter egg from other games like Forsaken or Poppy Playtime. Would you like to see little nods to other games hidden around the maps? In version 0.10.1, within the roleplay, the designations of tunes that were identified as common, unknown, and rare were changed to secondary to make it easier to classify the characters. Also in this version, 15 posters were redesigned, with better art and content changes. Machines. During development, the machines were called generators, inspired by the game Dead by Daylight. In their initial concept art, they didn't have lights to show if they were completed, something that was added later. There was an alternative design with 4 tubes that filled the glass chamber from the sides, specifically intended to be placed in the corners, but it was ultimately discarded because it significantly limited their placement on the map. There was also a very simple early model, a glass tube with rusty cylinders and a red light at the base instead of on top, completely without a valve, although in this particular screenshot Pebble appears to be turning it anyway. I think the intricate designs of these machines are truly incredible, and given the thoughtful way they're distributed around the map, I firmly believe adding variations, like the ones with tubes on the sides when they're near walls, would undoubtedly give greater immersion and a much better aesthetic. I understand that it would mean more work in programming and design, but I still hope to see something like that in the game someday. And that's why I'm adding the design of the old machines as the 5th item on my list of cut content that I'd like to see in Dandy World today. With these 5 elements that I've highlighted throughout the video, I think